I absolutely loved The Batman. It is easily a top 10 comic book movie of all time for me, and honestly, it's probably closer to 1 than it is to 10. So for The Batman 2 to potentially be better than The Batman, it's gotta be something quite special, and it's probably an unrealistic bar to set for the sequel that Matt Reeves has been working on for the last few years. But what's the point of making a sequel if you don't think you can make the new movie even better than the previous one? And today, I want to talk about a few ways I personally think The Batman 2 could be better than The Batman. One area where I thought The Batman was really good, but I think there's a whole nother level that Matt Reeves could take it to in the sequel is the action, specifically within the fight scenes. In the first film, I really loved how Matt Reeves showcased a younger, less experienced Batman fighting. Even though his fighting was effective for the majority of the film, as he did win almost all of his encounters even when he was greatly outnumbered, his fighting was a bit sloppy. He did not fight like how you would expect a well-seasoned and experienced Dark Knight in his prime, where he would just dominate a random encounter with a group of untrained fighters with ease, using minimal but powerful strikes to inflict heavy damage and utilizing his intelligence as well as his gadgets to limit the risk to himself and pick people off one by one instead of jumping into the middle of the fray like Pattinson's Batman did. Pattinson's Batman, of course, being so filled with piss and vinegar and wanting to be the vengeance that criminals feared, wanted to be more hands-on and really take out his anger. Hence why, instead of using things like stealth, he went out of his way to draw more attention to himself, like at the beginning of the movie where he actively made a loud noise, proceeds to step out of the shadows and takes on a whole group of like 6 people all at once. Because of his attitude and philosophy, as well as the fact that Batman was still in year 2 of his career, he takes a hell of a beating as the movie goes on from people not even remotely trained like him to fight. Whether that's the gangs at the beginning of the movie, the Riddler's psycho followers, or the people working at Penguin's Iceberg Lounge. In every encounter, you see Batman getting punched in the face, shot at fairly close range, hit by crowbars, or just tossed around for that matter. In the Batman 2, I would love to see this Batman become a bit more of a skilled fighter. Now, I know it may be hard to justify a large jump in fighting ability if the Batman 2 takes place only a few months after the first film, but even if his actual fighting ability physically is not drastically different, I would love to see him become a bit more cerebral with his fighting, whether that is developing more gadgets like a more traditional batarang to help with crowd control, or maybe just utilizing more stealth. I want to see Batman attempt to avoid some punches to the face in this movie and show that he is progressing into one of the best fighters in DC. Also selfishly, I would just love to see Matt Reeves film a true horror-like stealth sequence where we see Batman popping in and out of the shadows, grabbing people one by one. I think Reeves could do something truly awesome. Lastly, when it comes to potentially improving fight scenes, I would really love to see this version of Batman go toe-to-toe with somebody also extremely well trained in hand-to-hand combat. In the first film, Batman was really only challenged due to the sheer volume of enemies he had to encounter. There was not one individual fighter that we saw that could really go mano-a-mano with him and give him a real fight. I would love to see that change. Originally, I always thought it'd be cool if somebody like the Penguin had hired one of DC's top assassins to take out Batman, but based on early rumors, it seems like that's not happening, so instead, we may be looking at a character like Victor Zsasz perhaps, or a Talon if the Court of Owls is involved, or maybe even Poison Ivy depending on who's actually in the movie, and personally, I really do not care. I hope one of them or just someone in this movie is a trained fighter, so we can see Pattinson's Batman have his first real visceral one-on-one fight. Based on what we did get with some of Pattinson's moves in the first film, as well as how Reeves shot it, I think Reeves absolutely has the ability to create a fight scene that would be one of, if not the best Batman fight scenes put on the big screen. One area of Robert Pattinson's performance in the first film that I was surprised got as much criticism as it did was his portrayal as Bruce Wayne and the overall utilization of the character. Now, I am definitely not going to disparage anyone for simply not enjoying the portrayal of the character because not everyone has the same opinion when it comes to how Bruce Wayne should be portrayed, and Pattinson certainly is quite different than anything we had seen previously on the big screen. Where other iterations of the character were at times charming, fun, and likable, Pattinson's was reclusive, uncomfortable, and honestly kind of a dick at times, especially to Alfred, specifically the beginning of the scene in the hospital where Bruce ambushes Alfred with a lying accusation, and of course the cufflink scene stand out as moments where it's kind of easy to almost not like this version of Bruce. And in the Batman 2, I think it'd be great to lift the Bruce aspect of the character up a little bit more by giving him a bit more of a role in the sequel so that Pattinson has more of a chance to develop that character and show the evolution of his Bruce Wayne. I loved how in the first film Bruce was barely in it. It made sense considering we can tell that Bruce's mission as Batman is the only focus in his life. He doesn't have time to go out to parties, he doesn't have time for Wayne Enterprises, and he certainly doesn't have time to form any connections outside of the cape and cowl. Also, just selfishly enjoying the Batman part of the comics typically far more than Bruce Wayne, I thought it was cool to see a live action film where we got like 80% Batman and only 20% Bruce. However, I do think for the sequel maybe something like a 70-30 split with a focus on how Bruce is using the day to also help help Gotham would be good. Whether that's showcasing Bruce taking on a bigger role at Wayne Enterprises to help develop more tech that helps the normal people of Gotham City, leaning more into the philanthropic activities somebody like Bruce Wayne could do to help the city, or hell, even getting more involved in city politics by perhaps taking a more hands-on approach to endorsing candidates he actually believes has Gotham's best interests at heart, are all ways that I think would be great to show that even though this version of Bruce may still be socially awkward and hate being out in the public, he's evolving to not only provide more hope at night as Batman, but also as Bruce during the day. Additionally, even though this part is not something that is important, but I would personally love to see, and that is a plot that maybe puts Bruce into trouble and not Batman. For example, maybe Bruce Wayne is thrown into Arkham Asylum as he is suspected of committing a spree of murders across the city, or say Bruce Wayne needs to learn more about Arkham Asylum and the only way in is by getting himself admitted. Maybe he just does something on purpose to get admitted for a temporary amount of time. As you can tell, I'm absolutely obsessed with the idea of Bruce having to go into Arkham, but there are several other ways to make Bruce more of a focal point, and I do suspect that to happen in this movie. I thought it was worth mentioning though, because I know plenty of people who simply did not like Pattinson's portrayal of Bruce, or did not like how he was utilized in the first film. So I definitely think, just objectively, even though I did like Pattinson's portrayal and I thought I understood why he was like that in the first movie, I do think for a lot of people that's one way the Batman 2 could improve greatly on the first film. Now this next one is definitely in the eye of the beholder, and to some this may sound absolutely blasphemous, but could the Batman 2 potentially look better than the first movie? I know the first film was absolutely gorgeous and easily one of the best looking comic book movies of all time. Damn near every frame in that movie is like a painting, and in no way am I trying to diss the work of the first film, especially from Greg Fraser, who has cemented himself as one of the greatest cinematographers working today. Eric Messerschmidt has some massive shoes to fill, and it's very possible that the first film does end up looking better, but for those of you unfamiliar with Messerschmidt's work, he definitely has the goods. Some of his previous work includes things like The Killer, which I think is beautifully shot, as well as Mank, which is so unique and great in its own right. Yes, neither of those projects have the scale or action that something like the Batman 2 will almost certainly require, but I think it's quite clear that Messerschmidt has immense talent, and I do think him working hand in hand with Matt Reeves could be pretty special. In the next few months, this thought could definitely seem a little dumb, or be completely validated after the releases of Ridley Scott's The Dog Stars and David Fincher's Cliff Booth spin-off. Now I know for both movies, we are simply talking about trailers as of right now, but I really did like what we've seen so far from specifically The Adventures of Cliff Booth. I love the dark and grimy feel of the film paired with the pops of vibrant neon from old Hollywood. Eric Messerschmidt certainly does not have the track record of somebody like Greg Fraser as of right now, which not many people do, but he certainly is starting to build out his own very impressive filmography, and I do think he may surprise some people who are let down by Fraser's departure. I know all we've gotten so far from the Batman 2 was a short screen test, but if that's anything like how the rest of the film is going to look, I am excited. Another reason why I think the Batman 2 could surpass its predecessor visually is the fact that this film will be set in the dead of winter, and once again we will be getting a snowy Gotham, which to be fair, I think has been a bit hit or miss in live action so far, with The Dark Knight Rises not really being anything that special visually in my opinion, but Batman Returns on the other hand is just so damn awesome and gorgeous aesthetically, and it might be my favorite Batman film of all time outside of the Batman just purely visually. I cannot wait to see this version of the Batmobile roaring through the snowy streets of Gotham, Batman standing on top of a building overlooking Gotham in hopefully blizzard-like conditions, and most importantly seeing Batman fight in the snow, which just has so much potential. I absolutely loved the look and feel of the first film, especially with all of the rain. It felt like a true Gotham City come to life, but I don't know what it is, maybe it's just the northern Midwest in me, but I just love the snow, and I think visually it could add a whole new dimension to Gotham and the film itself that Messerschmidt could do some amazing stuff with, especially if he still uses a lot of inspiration from how Fraser shot the first one. Another thing that I think the Batman 2 could potentially do better than the first film that might be a bit controversial to some is the villain. In the first film, I do think that Paul Dano gave a really disturbing and unhinged performance that was really good. I love the inspiration that Reeves and company took from things like the Zodiac, John Doe, as well as even Jigsaw with some of the elaborate traps that Riddler's victims were subjected to, and I would even argue a character like Hush. From time to time, I love a more fun and zany Riddler, but I do think it is hard to adopt that in live action, so going the route of something more sinister sinister, disturbing, and realistic, was a perfect choice for the Gotham Matt Reeves set out to create, and I think he was a really good choice for a more detective-focused Batman film. However, even though I like Dano's Riddler, I don't know if I would say it's one of the best comic book movie villain performances or even Batman movie villain performances of all time. Which I completely understand is a ridiculous bar for any performance or any character to meet, but for the Batman 2 to surpass the first film, it's gonna have to win on the margins, and even though I do think the Riddler was very good, I do think there's potential room for improvement, considering I do think Batman's rogues gallery is filled with better villains, and I think it's pretty clear the Riddler isn't even the best villain in the Batman universe. Now I know the Penguin benefited from a much further deep dive through television, which allows you to go really in depth with a character and add new layers which you simply do not have time to do in a movie, but the point I'm trying to make is it's not like the Riddler cannot be topped. Now when it comes to the Batman 2, the rumors about who is who and who the actual villain of the film is are all over the place, so I cannot make a case for any one specific villain, but based on the rumors as of right now, I do like some of the stuff that we are hearing. Whether Sebastian Stan is playing Harvey Dent and potentially Two-Face or Victor Zsasz, I think there's a really good chance he will knock it out of the park. Let's just say he ends up playing Victor Zsasz, which I do think is a possibility. I'm quite excited because I think he would make an absolutely horrifying serial killer. Even though I wouldn't call the Riddler in the first film intimidating, there were specific shots and moments that made him come off as a horror villain, even with a duct tape mask and glasses. Imagining some of the absolutely frightening things they could do with a character like Victor Zsasz, stalking his prey and just being absolutely deranged, could be absolutely sinister and could exceed the more horror-like aspect of Riddler from the first movie. Now say Stan is playing Harvey, I would also be really interested to see what new things Reeves would have in store for that character and his potential turn as Two-Face, and I'd be equally if not more excited if it was Brian Tyree Henry because he's an absolutely phenomenal actor in his own right, and the idea of his Harvey paired with Stan Zsasz I do find a bit more exciting than Stan playing Harvey and Henry playing somebody like Harvey Bullock. Not to diss Harvey Bullock as a character, he is great, but I do think a villain role for Brian Tyree Henry would be a lot of fun. Even though it's not confirmed, and I could be wrong, I'd be quite shocked if Scarlett Johansson is not playing a villain in this film as well. She's most likely actually the main villain of the film. I know recent rumors suggested Poison Ivy as a potential character she could be playing, and all I have to say to that is hell yes, as well as sorry to those of you who I disagreed with in the comments when you suggested Scarlett could be Ivy. I was wrong. Matt Reeves may be willing to lean a bit more fantastical than I thought, but regardless of who she plays, I'm just so excited to see Scarlett play a more villainous character. Plus there's of course Charles Dance, who even though I have no clue what specific character he's going to be playing, I'd be willing to put money on the fact that he's most likely going to be playing an asshole at minimum, and it's very possible that he is playing a villain. I don't know if he's going to be a part of this wider conspiracy that a lot of people are theorizing, and personally I would love to see, but we'll talk more about that if we get some more clues about the Court of Owls in a future trailer or something like that. Oh, and also there's the Penguin in this movie. Even though Colin Farrell has said his role in this movie is going to be quite small, that is still another villain that is going to be occupying the space in this film. Now, even though I'm making the point that I think villain could be an area where the Batman 2 improves upon the first film, I think there's probably some of you who are thinking exactly what I am when I laid out all of the names of those villains, and that is, are there potentially too many villains in the Batman 2? And as of right now, all I have to say to that is, I don't know, hopefully not. We are still in full-blown rumor territory when it comes to the Batman 2, and we most likely will be until potentially next summer when the first trailer comes out, most likely attached to Man of Tomorrow if I had to guess. So some of these supposed castings could be completely wrong. However, say they are all right, there's just no way to know how the characters are going to be utilized in the movie. For example, take Harvey Dent as a character. If he's going to be played by Sebastian Stan, what if Harvey Dent is just Harvey Dent for the entirety of the movie? That's something that could happen. Maybe Two-Face is something they want to tell later down the line if they ever get to, say, a third film. We just honestly have no idea. But even if it ends up being Sebastian Stan as Victor Zsasz, we have Brian Tyree Henry as Harvey Dent, we have Scarlett Johansson as Poison Ivy, and Charles Dance as some figure for the Court of Owls. It's very possible that Matt Reeves and company have come up with a script that utilizes all of those characters in a way that makes each individual villain feel valuable to the overall script. If you've read Batman comics, there are a lot of comics out there that have so many villains shoved into them, yet the story still does feel coherent and still makes sense. That's what the Batman 2 would have to do if we do go down that path. And remember, the Batman 1 had a lot of villains as well, but they were able to create a story that each individual villain made sense within the overall story. So even though I totally understand the skepticism, especially when you have potentially that many villains, that means there's a lot of mouths to feed, and it can be hard for one villain to really stand out and give a top tier performance. And I understand that for some, the improvement from Riddler to whoever the main villain of the film is going to be might be something that could be viewed as too marginal and not worth discussing, but I do think it's an area where if the Batman 2 can find a way to improve, it could be exactly what the film needs to set itself apart from the first. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to these superhero movies, the villain performance is probably more important than even the hero's performance when determining how great a film is. Just think of all of the greatest superhero movies of all time. A lot of times those films feature one of the greatest villain performances of all time. In many ways, I'd argue that it's the performance of the hero which sets the floor for a film and its overall quality, but it's the performance of the villain that sets the ceiling. I would say in the mind of most people, the weakest part of the Batman was the film's third act, which I do not think is actually bad or anything, but it suffers from the success of the first two acts of the film, which were humming at anywhere from a 9 to a 10 out of 10, whereas the third act probably is more in a 8 to 10, maybe 7.5 out of 10 range. Again, it's not a bad score, and there are certainly some great moments like Batman leading the citizens out of the flood, as well as the great monologue that followed where Batman realizes he must be more for the city. I literally still get goosebumps every time I hear that monologue. I think it's honestly perfect and sums up Batman in such a beautiful way. However, even with a great moment like that, the third act is very clearly the worst act of the film, and I do think that's mostly due in part to the mystery of the Riddler being solved a bit early, and the fact that even though the Riddler's plan does come to fruition with the flood, Riddler himself is sidelined in Arkham, and Batman's final battle is against just a bunch of Riddler's crazed followers. The action itself in the stadium I also think is much weaker than stuff we get earlier in the film, like the fight at the train station, the Batmobile chase, or even the 2 times Batman infiltrates the Iceberg Lounge. I honestly think the main reason the third act feels maybe not as good as it actually is the fact that the film itself peaks well before the huge finale, which is always going to hurt the third act. But now, how could the Batman 2 improve the third act? First off, I would say if there's another mystery type plot, carry that mystery into the third act so it doesn't feel like the film reaches its climax with 40 minutes left to go, which I completely understand is much easier said than done, but in the first film, after taking Falcone off the board and the amazing interrogation of the Riddler scene in Arkham, there was simply no way for the flood plot to reach anywhere near the heights of what the first 2 hours of the film had set off. In many ways, the flood itself felt like a different film and somewhat like the studio mandated huge action scene that of course is a requirement of any superhero movie. Again, we don't know who the villain is actually going to be, but regardless of who it is, I would like to see them and Batman have their final showdown in the third act, and by the showdown, that doesn't mean it has to be physical. Of course, I think it'd be fun to see Batman go toe-to-toe with the villain in an awesome final battle, but a showdown can be completely mental as well, like what we got with the Riddler in Arkham. Most importantly though, make it more emotional. When Batman was fighting Riddler's followers, I honestly felt nothing. Yes, some of the shots were cool, and seeing Batman go to a last-ditch effort like injecting adrenaline to help save Catwoman was a great moment, but the flood and final battle really lacked any emotional heft. Of course, I think the monologue added some of that after the fact, and the Penguin series really painted the picture of how truly horrifying the flood was, but in the moment, it just did not have the weight of what we got before that. If the Batman 2 can find a way to carry some more of its narrative threads into the third act, pair it with an absolutely kick-ass action scene that folks will talk about as one of the best in any Batman movie ever, and raise the emotional stakes, I do think the third act could definitely be a place where the Batman 2 separates itself from the first Batman. But of course, when it comes with all of these improvements that we talked about in this video, all things that I think are valid and ways that the Batman 2 could be better than the first film, Matt Reeves still has to hold the same quality in every other aspect. It doesn't maybe have to be the exact same, especially if you're improving what we've talked about today, but it's going to be an immensely hard challenge for Matt Reeves and company to make a film that is better than the first Batman. I of course have high hopes that they'll be able to do it, but even if they can't and it's on the same level or just slightly below, that would still be a huge accomplishment and a huge success. I absolutely cannot wait to see this movie and see what Matt Reeves and company are cooking up. In the comments, I would love to hear what you think are some ways that the Batman 2 could be better than the first film, or if you don't want to talk about improvements, just let me know what you'd like to see from the Batman 2. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in another video.